Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. Welcome to another episode. There is no countdown timer because now we're after the 4th of July. The PMA is up and running. If you haven't already done so, go check out financialpma.com. I actually bought all the other domains as well, so it doesn't matter if you type in .org or .net or whatever, it all redirects to financialpma.com anyway. On Financial PMA, we've got the beginnings of some great stuff. Got tremendous conversation around those folks who have joined the PMA, and in the coming weeks, we're going to start discussing their life circumstances, kind of their financial picture, and the steps that we're taking to unpackage and unwrap and undo all of that wokeness that we're finding in their portfolio. By the way, if you are still interested in taking those first steps in going unwoke in your financial life, defund the woke, as we like to say, but aren't sure where to go or how to do it, and you want some direction and guidance, go back a couple of episodes and check out the episode with Matt and Drew from Inspire Advisors. They are a spectacular group based out of the Columbus, Ohio area. And I've partnered with them for providing financial planning, financial advice. And they work one-on-one, just your typical financial advisors. However, they are decidedly non-woke. If you like what they do, actually, before I get into whether or not you like them, I hope you do. And I think you will. But they have actually offered generously to anybody who listens to and likes the messaging of UnWoke. For all those folks, that means you can go to them and they will run what's called an impact report for you. It shows, based on the composition of your portfolio, how woke-a-doodle your portfolio is. That's my term, not theirs. And they're going to offer that to you for free. So no strings attached. They're just going to help the world figure out where the woke is in your financial picture. And if you do end up liking them, and I hope you do, and end up working with them as your new financial planners, some of their revenue from that, some of what they earn, comes back to me. We've negotiated that deal. There, it's called kind of taking a haircut in our nomenclature in the financial world. They haven't changed their fee structure at all. It's the same as it is for everybody that they work with. However, if you arrive at their door and end up working with them through listening to me, that helps to pay UnWoke and the work that we do here, and generates the new reports and keeps the lights on and things like this happening, the podcasts and distribution, etc. So if you do, bless you. We are pleased and thankful to have our friends out there that are supporting us in various different ways as we've made the move from a regulated entity to unregulated in order to continue this voice and this podcast. So that's one avenue. We do have subscriber content. If you can subscribe, great. Some of the content that we release comes out a little bit earlier, typically around maybe 3 days early for people who are paid subscribers. We have to kind of thank them somehow. Ultimately, everything we do is publicly available. All the stuff that we're talking about here, all of the for public consumption discussions, all of it. There's just that little bit of a delay because we need to find good and valuable ways for us to show our appreciation for those who financially support UnWoke. Thanks again. And also, we've got some relationships now with folks like Awake Not Woke Coffee, and I hope over time that grows because we're changing our business model. We're doing that. If you missed that whole build up to 4th of July 2024, we're doing that because for 28 months, I and my company was under attack from weaponized regulators. They don't like my voice. They don't like, not literally, but they don't like the things that I say. they don't really like anything about me because I'm not buying into the woke far left narrative. And so they came after me, and I realized that I need to pivot and work in a different direction that allows me to continue to be vocal without getting crushed by the regulators. So, all that said, I want to give a tip of the hat to our friends over at OBBM Network. They've been spectacular and tremendously helpful. If you yourself are thinking of, or if you have content that's out, you can't go wrong with OBBM Network, or I don't imagine you will. Contact OBBM Network. They have a Roku channel app. They have all kinds of stuff. They're great and wonderful and supportive and helpful, and they have been a blessing as I've figured this podcast thing out. And came out on October 27th of last year with our first podcast, and since then we've been off to the races, thanks in large part to OBBM Network. So today I want to get a little bit into how we react to the world around us. So we can clearly see that everything seems to want to be going woke-a-doodle. And by that, I mean cultural revolution. It's cultural Marxism. This is how it's done. It's been done this way over and over again throughout history. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as a new concept. It's all been done before. It's just recycled. So all this stuff, from all the COVID fear to lockdowns, to sexualizing children, to all this pride, basically they're like porn shows and parades and public streets, and these things have been done before, and there's a purpose behind all of them. I could get into great detail. I'm making it my point to study up on a lot of these things, but a lot of it I already knew anyway. As a side note, anybody that doesn't know, and I do get notes, thank you, I actually read the notes. I get notes from our listeners to interject more personal stuff. I guess I'm interesting, at least to some people. Thank you for that. I hope that this proves interesting. Little known fact, I stumbled into learning German because language was mandatory starting in 9th grade at the school that I attended, the K through 12 education system. So I stumbled into German. I learned a lot of German, and along the way, I ended up living for a short period in central Germany and had occasion to go into East Berlin before the wall came down. So I got to experience that. We went through the checkpoint. We were questioned by Stasi. One of my colleagues actually had a camcorder. At the time, camcorders weren't all that common, and he was questioned for about 45 minutes. Eventually was allowed into East Germany, but they kept his camcorder. I think eventually he got it back, but he was not permitted to enter East Berlin with a camcorder because if you speak German, or I'll translate for you, we happened to be there for 750 Jahre Berlin, which was the 750th anniversary of the founding of the city of Berlin. 750 Jahre, and there were some protests, Die Mauer muss weg. So they were talking about tearing down the wall. That's what that means. Die Mauer muss weg, away with the wall, basically. It's kind of what that translates to. So we did years of intensive German study, and I had occasion to go to several of the concentration camps and learn in German, and in Germany a lot about the history of things like the burning of the Reichstag. If you're not familiar with that, look it up. It's a critical piece of history in the rise of the Nazi Party. So I learned all this stuff, and I have parts of my understanding come from sort of secondhand information directly from people who were communicating about their experiences in Nazi Germany. And actually at one of the houses that I moved into in a place called Beechwood, Ohio, which is a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, a Jewish community. Our next door neighbor actually was a survivor of the concentration camps. She lost all of her family. She was 91 at the time, spectacular lady. And she would tell us stories about what happened. So anyway, put all that stuff together, and having the tremendous additional blessing of a number of friends of ours who are Russian, Yugoslavian, Venezuelan, Chinese, and currently I can't claim any close Korean friends. I think through the years I've had great friendships and interactions with a handful of South Koreans, but I do listen to a lot of what comes out from the people who have escaped North Korea. And there's actually a great book in there called A River in Darkness. I read that about a man who ended up drawn into the allure of communism when Korea was establishing itself, and Kim Jong-un was creating what is now North Korea. Anyway, my point in bringing all that stuff up is if we don't have a historical perspective, like true history, what bad people have done throughout history to do bad things, then we don't really have perspective on the stuff that happens around us. One of the things that I encourage people to know is not just, and I talk about this all the time, that the feeling, that the understanding, the belief, the certainty that sexualizing children is not good, for instance. That's one example. But in the Weimar Republic, which was the precursor to, it was that era in Germany, just prior to the rise and ascension of Nazi Germany, in that time, it was prevalent. There were vaudeville shows with cross-dressing children being sexualized. And there's a reason that that stuff is done. If you don't understand that and grapple with it, then all of the things that are going on can seem bewildering and daunting, or worse, you might be lured into thinking that this is some revolutionary great new thing, including the people out there that are somehow mystifyingly on board with sexualizing children. But it goes beyond that. It goes into who controls capital, who controls business, and everything from shipping and logistics and supply chain, etc. And there are people out there that are all caught up in this notion that our ambivalent government is going to step in now and they'll make everything fair and just and equitable, and BS. Because 100% of the time in history, without exception, 100% of the time, that's what's sold. That's what's pitched by communism. It's unjust the way that the system works. 100% of the time. Somebody is a victim of something, they're presented as some sort of victim. And if we go to communism or socialism, whatever you want to call it now, they're not even naming it, just the vague thing that's happening in the United States that's awful. You can call it, I just call it social communism, because the left like to blur things together and hyphenate names and stuff. So if you're not familiar with the intentions of social communism, then you might think, and if you're uninformed about history, then you might think that that we're going to get through this thing and there's going to be major cultural upheaval and we're going to change everything about our system of government. But then when we're done and we get to the other side, there's going to be all this fairness and equity and this equality of everything, and people, those poor oppressed fill in the blank people, oh, they're going to be better served by communism. Never. 100% death, doom, and failure awaits. Mass starvation. Another book recommendation. I'm going to throw some breadcrumbs out to you. The other one is called Tombstone by Yang Jisheng, who wrote about the mass starvation of about 53 million Chinese during the Maoist revolution. Same thing in Cuba, Same thing was pitched in Yugoslavia, Venezuela, you name it, anywhere. The pitch is, once we go to communism and we change our system of government and everything, then everything's going to be all fair and roses and stuff. It never is. That's my point. So I find it keenly interesting. I'm looking at my phone now because I seem to keep getting this meme, and it hits me. I have a particular sort of a connection to the message of this meme, and it just simply says, if you've ever wondered how regular people stood by and watched Germany descend into Nazism, now you know. I'm going to read that again. If you've ever wondered how regular people stood by and watched Germany descend into Nazism, now you know. So we have an environment now where the Nazis, and there's some really interesting, if you like history, and I do, there's some really interesting history there. The Nazis who were found out and were escaping Germany as the Third Reich was collapsing, they went various places. Many went to Argentina, other parts of Europe. Many came to the eastern seaboard of the United States and formed some connections, allegedly, although you can look it up and see for yourself, with Columbia University. And then through Columbia University, you have some offshoots and some influence on things like the Velvet Underground in the United States and BLM in the United States, etc. So there's cultural Marxism that has taken root from a whole bunch of people who have their minds fixated on the concept of driving Nazi principles. Here's a hint. Nazi stands for the German Socialist Workers' Party. Keyword, socialism. That's not the right. In the United States, there's this whole, among all the other hoaxes and gimmicks and schlock, misinformation and disinformation that spread, the left, who own all the bad stuff, they literally, the left owned the KKK, Jim Crow laws, socialism, they own all that stuff. Well, Nazis have a very bad name, understandably. And so the left want to disown them. And so they've just started rewriting history and saying that the Nazis are like the right. It's the opposite. The right believe in limited government and some constitutional rights and individual autonomy and privileges, etc. All those things. The Nazi Party are the ones that want to control everything. And that's where we are now. The people who are leading the conversation politically, they are driving conversation around a centralized, federalized government that controls literally everything, from transportation to foods we eat, to when we can travel, who gets to travel, currency, financial exchanges, currency exchanges, what constitutes land rights, taking away land rights, putting in the passports, those kinds of things, is sort of COVID passport BS to control movement. So when you saw the Nazis would pull people over and stop and ask for your papers, show me your papers, please. That's Nazism, and that's socialism. Socialism wants to control all that stuff, and it's intertwined and mixed with communism. They're kissing cousins. So what do we do about it? That's the purpose of this podcast. I want to talk about the manifestations of it. So for several years, I was seeing the infiltration of far left agenda and influence into K through 12 education. It's clearly there. It's Weimar Republic stuff, sexualizing children, pushing porn, teaching kids that the state is more important and closer to them and there to be trusted more than their parents and grandparents, and that the culture is bad and needs to be replaced, and rewriting history and tearing down statues and stuff. That's all happening right now in the United States. And so there are people that recognize what that is and are saying no. And at a certain point, it is incumbent upon all of us who care to find even small, subtle ways of pushing back. And here's what that looks like just today. I do this sort of thing a lot. There's a payroll company out there. I'm going to post, actually, I'll put a link to a post that I put about this. I shared this out with many of the people that I engage with, but there's a payroll company out there that has been steadily ramping up their twisted rhetoric around DEI and the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, which is fiction, and it's based entirely on a whole stream of lies and misrepresentation and twisting and distortion of history and truth. And I don't believe that a payroll company has any right to step into sort of the political activism, and especially one that has influence and exerts communications into human resources offices. So I push back. I sent a message to them. I will include a link. You can read the little blurb, and you can read my message back to them. My point in making this podcast today and in highlighting that company is because all of those things, when you go into, I don't care where it is, the grocery store, and they start to try to tell you to put masks on again and social distance. Clearly, we finally even have Fauci admitting he just made that stuff up just to manipulate. Well, I can't assign objective. I can't assign his agenda, but he made the stuff up. So any grocery store, if they're going to try to tell you to mask again and social distance, and if you get a bank that tries to cancel somebody, anybody, you included, because they hold conservative values or are patriotic, or you get somebody that tells you you can't have an American flag or the whatever flag you want, the Gadsden flag, all of that stuff, the agenda of the left is to defeat us through many small steps. And it takes us, and it takes courage for each and every one of us, as often as possible, to step up and say, no, you're wrong. We're not going to do that. Recently, a guy on social media platforms like X, his name is Robbie Starbuck. Robbie Starbuck did a big series of posts and podcasts on, this one was on Tractor Supply. So Tractor Supply tried to start going woke-a-doodle, and we, the people, stepped in and said, nope, get out of here with that nasty stuff. It doesn't belong. Get it out of Tractor Supply, and it worked. Now, we, the people, that's the template. That's the example. You take that, find Robbie Starbuck on social media, watch his podcast, and watch what happens, and watch the pushback. I did one as well. Actually, I did a podcast that basically just referenced the work that Robbie Starbuck had done. He did great work covering that. But the point is, we, the people, have a voice. Your vote is your voice. Your voice is your voice. So when you're on social media, use your voice to push back against these companies. Tag them, name them, call them, write them, send emails. Whatever you can do, it's up to us to find ways to push back. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. This has been another episode of UnWoke.academy.